G'day everyone, I'm here with Tom. Tom Glover is not really the coach, but he's one of the lifters at the Chads, the team that are competing at our Challengers bracket here at the TSF Team Champs. And I'm glad to be speaking to Tom today. G'day mate, how are you going?
JP, thanks for having me. No, I'm really excited for this. I've seen a couple of the other ones, and I like the long form, like talking a bit, seeing how all the other teams go. But yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm glad, and it's obviously it's our way of trying to pump up the comp and not even pump it up in the sense of like get millions of viewership and whatever, but it's just to create a bit of excitement and to have everyone uh, you know excited for the comp and a bit of anticipation and get to know the personalities behind the lifters, right? Because a lot of time we don't even know who these people are on the platform, but hopefully these kind of little episodes give us a bit of an insight into who everyone is and especially who are the Chads. So I guess that's my first question is, who the fuck are you guys?
Yeah, right. So we're a team a bit out of left field. I think most people have sort of recognized. So to go back when it started, I actually saw the TSF 10 champs. I watched it last year, didn't compete. And this year came around and I thought, okay, this looks like a lot of fun.
When
And
you say you
then
watched it, were you there at the comp or did you see it online or?
No, I was just watching it by the stream last year, and I kind of like the layout of it. I was sort of thinking about it this year, and I messaged a couple of our friends, and so the first person I messaged was Remi. We had a chat, and we're like, "Oh, what do you think about maybe putting together a team?" And at that point, we didn't know how the logistics work. That's sort of when I went back and forth with you and going with coaches and everything. So I messaged Remi, and we decided, "Yep, let's sort of put together a team." And at that point, it was kind of figuring out, I guess, a little bit of can we split people into 4 weight classes? So then I actually reached out to Brodie McDowell, a big 125, and he was 100% keen for it because I actually met him at Nationals 2022 for USAPL, and we've been talking ever since. So I thought, yep, he's incredibly strong. Let's put him in the mix. And then the last one was Joyce. I think I watched his nationals that kind of sparked my mind. I had a few people mention and drop his name, and I was thinking, gee, yeah. I was looking at stuff like, gee, this kid's strong. He's a chance to take out the 82s. So I popped him in, and lo and behold, we have the Chads who are definitely an interesting bunch. Not necessarily a conventional team, but that's, I guess, the fun of it.
Right. So more or less, like obviously the rest of the other teams kind of tend to be clubs, groups, coaches, or whatnot. Whereas you are a group of just mates, essentially, basically a team of champions rather than a champion team. And I think that's going to be what's going to be an interesting assessment as to how that actually goes and how that kind of performs. So you kind of mentioned the characters you've got there, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each person and how they fare in their weight class and a little bit of predictions, I suppose, or a preview is the word I was looking for. But I wanted to talk to you about, when you kind of inquired with me, when you kind of sent me the email and said like, hey, how does this work and stuff? I'm a very blunt person, I'm a very direct person, especially by email. And I said, look, mate, you're clowning yourself. You need to have a coach because that's what defines a coach. And you kind of said, look, we just want to have our own individual coaches. How did you kind of find your coach and who is your coach?
Yeah, so the first interaction you actually said, "Oh, you need a coach." Tom, I was like, "Oh, like we're in a bit of strife because our team, it's not like we're not coached by the same person." So we had a chat, and at that point, I was sort of looking with a bit of rehab, and one of our team, Remi, his coach is Shant, Strength Revolution. So I reached out to Shant, and I just sort of said like, "Hey, would you be keen to look after our team on the day, maybe submit attempts and just sort of help it run a bit more smoothly?" He was 100% down. So that's pretty much how we picked it. There was no real science behind it, but he's a good coach. And I thought, yep, let's use him for it.
Excellent. So what's his name? Shant. What's his name? Sorry.
Shant Rahman from
Shant
Strength
Rahman.
Revolution.
Okay, cool. So he's going to be your coach on the day because a lot of people aren't even sure of that. There hasn't been, like in the nominations list and then obviously in the lifting cast, there's no mention of coaches. Like everybody knows who the coaches are of the other clubs because it's kind of pretty obvious or it's even in the name. But
Yeah.
for the Chads, it's not so clear. So Shant's going to be the coach. And I guess like my flow-on question from there, right, is like in your email to me, you said like, oh, we're just going to have our own coach. We'll be right. I was like, no, that's not how it works. You have to have the same person coaching the whole team. How do you think it's going to fare when you've got someone who's not so familiar with the other three, kind of like running their day, running their attempts, and managing, I suppose, a group of lifters who they might not be so familiar with? Or are you actually trying to familiarize yourselves with him as much as you can in the lead up?
Well, funny story. So Brodie and Josh actually have never met him. Goes sort of along the shambles theme with our team, but I have met him once because I do a little bit of rehab with him. So I only met him a couple of weeks ago, actually. But in terms of how it's going to run on the day, I think our team is pretty keen on a self-sufficient day. So being able to choose your own attempts and sort of adjust where needed. Now we have been training together a lot, like the last couple of weeks, to gauge how each other perform, because then we can always help each other out. But at the end of the day, it should have sort of us communicating to Sean what works for us, and he can just sort of help facilitate that. That's sort of the main goal for it.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, cool. So I really do actually, well, two things I want to say is one is you kind of self-referred to as the shambles that we are, which I think is a good self-acknowledgement there. But I do appreciate the fact that you guys have been training together the last few weeks, doing your sessions on Saturdays. Like I think you mentioned, you're going to go out and train together at ESS today. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you are actually embracing the team element that it is to compete in this comp, because it could be easy to assume from the outside that you are very separate people who are just kind of like meeting up on the day to try to take home some cash. But actually, you guys are creating that kind of like camaraderie, I suppose.
Yeah. So we have a group chat and we sort of decided, right, the best thing for us to do is show face as a team and just get a bit of traction around us, because we're not necessarily coming from an established team like Lou Lift or Sim Strength, the first two I think of. It's more a group of us who need to prove a little bit more that we're cohesive. And that's, I guess, what training together consistently actually does. And it's a lot of fun. Like, we're all good mates. We go get a bit of food afterwards and just enjoy it, because at the end of the day, it's a comp. It's something to enjoy, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I've said this so many times in other episodes, it's like, of course, the competitive side is freaking awesome and everyone's, really fired up, but ultimately you're there to have a good time. And if you can kind of, it's almost funny because it sounds like, you, for example, Josh, you're not so close with him, or at least not initially. And now you've almost created this relationship with this, the four of you kind of make this friendship group. It's kind of really cute. And it's actually quite wholesome, considering you guys are supposed to be the bad guys of the storyline. But we'll get into that in a second. Before that, I want to ask about the actual individual lifters. So you mentioned Josh. Josh is in the 82.5. Tell us, 82s are the most stacked weight class on the men's side. I think there's 11 or 12 lifters in there. What's Josh's background? I know he's competed at the Nationals a couple of times, but I've never seen him lift myself. Who is Josh, for those who don't know, and how good is he actually as a lifter?
So Josh, who is coached by David Dobson, coincidentally was my first coach. He hasn't been lifting like powerlifting in the spotlight for all that long, but he's come up very quickly. He's done a couple of really big pulls. He's a big squatter, and I think that shows like he's very consistent across all three lifts, which is what you would look for with a high level lifter, in my opinion. In terms of competition for his class, I think he's going to fare pretty well in it. We've sort of had a look at everyone. There are a couple of individuals like Jacob Shepard. I think he looks like he's incredibly strong. I don't know specifics because he doesn't post that much. I don't really follow him on Instagram, but I think if anyone was to give Josh a run for money, it's possibly Jacob. But yeah, I think Josh is going to do pretty well in the 82s.
Yeah, Josh looks like a very well-rounded lifter, like you said. Like, he doesn't have a clear weakness. Oftentimes young guys who are good squat and deadlifters tend to be bad at bench press. I definitely know that feeling. But he looks really well-rounded. What's his best total at his last comp? Do you happen to know that?
I think it's just short of 700, if I believe.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, he's got the skills to crack 700. It's just about putting it together on the day.
Right. So I'm just looking at his open powerlifting right now. Like, his best total 685 at the Nationals. At what did he weigh here? That's 80 kilos. And so he's even at that point he had some time, he had some space to put on some body weight. And I imagine that's what he's doing. And so I imagine he's also improved, right? Because he's young. He's only early 20s. Is that right?
Yeah, he's very young. He's also the thing is with him, he's relatively new to the sport, I would say. He's not super tenured, so he's got a lot of growth as well. And to be so strong at such a young age as well is a big advantage for Josh.
Right. And it also tells me that he's still improving, like even if his training wasn't very good, which it looks like it's going very well, just with the age, you're getting older, you're getting bigger. At that age, you're just so anabolic. And so if his best total is 685 6 months ago, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does at this comp. And it sounds like he's going to go past 700. But, you mentioned Jacob Skepis. Jacob is a very experienced lifter, and I think that will be an interesting battle. I can't help but feel that Josh is going to be the better lifter, like the stronger lifter. Jacob's best total is, in the high 600s. But since then, he's had a whole bunch of stuff happen in his life, and he's got 2 kids, and he's got a whole bunch of other stuff. And training's just not his priority. But he's very experienced, both as a lifter and a coach, and he's kind of got he's very mentally strong, I will say about Jacob. He's very mentally strong, and he kind of likes having his, back up against the wall and being a bit of the underdog. So I can't help but feel that's actually going to fire him up. So that'll be a really, really fun battle. So 82.5, the manlets. Who's up next in the 100 class? Is that you?
That's me.
You have never lifted in this weight class. Tell me the story here.
Yeah, right. So I think there's a bit of, from what I've heard, there's a bit of chatter about me dropping down to the hundreds. So I've competed all in the 110s. All the comps that I've done about, I think, 5 or so comps. The idea of it was I was sitting like nationals, I was about 107, and I wasn't really filling out the class. I was pretty big. I felt quite big in it. So I thought, you know what, let's just cut it down to about walking weight 102 and see how we go, crack in the hundreds. Now, I signed up for TSF still being about 105. And I think a few people had a couple of questions. Oh, he's going to do a water cut and maybe it'll make him bomb out. But I guess I've got a nutritionist now, actually, Raz from Output. So he's really helped me dial it in. I didn't realize how out of place my nutrition was, I guess, until I had someone sort of focus on it. But he's been really good, and we're already sitting at about 100, 101 kilos. So we're within striking distance of just walking on the platform.
And so it sounds like, if you're at 101, to me, that tells me that, your training numbers now, they're not so inflated. Like sometimes people will be training at 106, they'll be like, hit a bench PB. And I'm like, but that's different. Like 106 to 100 is a bit of a gap. Whereas if you're at 101 and you're hitting numbers in the gym, that's probably a fair reflection of where you might land on the day. Obviously, Remi's in the 110, but I wanted to ask, was there a bit of jostle as to who was going to be the one to go down to 100, or was it always going to be you?
No, so I think I came into it with the idea that Remi was going to be the 110s because at his body weight now, he's incredibly strong. Like, I don't know if you've seen many of his lifts, but especially his bench and his squat have improved dramatically. Like he's sniffing distance in 300 plus on a squat, and he's been benching 210. So I mean, they're some of the high numbers for any athletes in
210
USA,
touch and go,
Australia.
300 high.
Yes, yeah. there is that question, but he's, in my opinion, he's incredibly strong at what he's doing. So there was never really a question of, because my frame isn't as wide as his, so it's always me drop down and then he push that.
Okay, cool. And so it looks like your training's going well. You're in a deep class, the 100 class. A lot of good lifters. I'm looking at Tony Nguyen. I'm looking at Tyson Andrews, Matt Cronadal, obviously. Even Scott Micklejohn on day one, and Gabe. This is just a good list of lifters. Timothy Wang lifted very well at the same comp last year. How do you think you're going to fare in the 100 kilo class?
Good question. So I've watched the interviews. I have thought about this a little bit. So I've kind of got two scenarios. So I think on day one, it's me versus Tyson. I haven't met Tyson personally, but from what I've seen, incredibly strong. Squat, bench especially, really strong deadlifter as well. That'll be interesting. I think he'll give me a very stiff run for my money. I think in terms of me personally, I'm probably middle of the pack on squat. Like, it's nothing special. It's not anything to write home about. But I think, well, anywhere from 270 to 280, 282 maybe. Depends what's there. But I think in terms where my strengths are, probably bench and deadlift, they're more on the upper echelon of those. So that spot's probably going to carry me home. And if I had to rank the top 5, or at least what it is now, the list, in no particular order, I would have Tony Nguyen, Tyson, Tim Wang, myself, and to be honest, I would say top 4. I can't remember off the top of my head the rest of them, but I think top 4, that's probably those guys. Now, I did go to ESS a couple weeks ago and possibly alluded to the fact that Hung might be dropping down to the hundreds. Can't be confirmed for another week, but if he comes in, he's obviously incredibly talented, and that'll really push the boundaries for what we need to do to a podium at least.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what ESS are going to do because they've already got a lifter in the 100 kilo class. So kind of like you guys, you got someone in the 100, someone in the 110. If Hung comes down to 100, what happens to Tony to win? I'm not really sure what their plan is there.
Yeah, well, I think as someone mentioned in an interview, he is signed up for Apex. So whether he does that, I'm not sure. But I guess it's exciting that we don't know what's going to happen, and they've got the power to sort of dictate what their team does. But I mean, either way, I think ESS, whether it's Tony or Hung, will place top 3. That's sort of my guess because they're both incredibly strong lifters. I think top 3 would probably be, order Tyson, myself, and ESS, whether that's Tony or Hung.
Right. And so it sounds like, one of my suspicions, and this is not coming from any place of knowledge, is that Hung goes down to 100, Tony pulls out and focuses on coaching, and instead one of the girls they've got there at ESS actually jumps in. I forget her name off the top of my head, but they've got a young girl there that Matt Crandall mentioned.
Catherine Chakra, I believe.
That's the one, yeah, Catherine might jump in. So I would not be surprised to see that take place. That would, for me, obviously as a meet director, but obviously as a fan as well, be a little disappointing because I'd love to see Hung absolutely maul Remi in the 110s. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens in a week from now, or less than a week from now. Speaking of which, the 110s, it's only 4 lifters in there at the moment, and like we said, there might be some changes, but it's a very strong list of 4 lifters. Talk us through Remi and who he's facing.
Yeah, so Remi comes in I think of a lot of seen as a very strong lifter. He's arguably, I would say, without a doubt, going to take the 110s. I do also know some of the other lifters like Gus. Gus is incredibly strong. His squat and deadlift have been blowing up as well. Angus Williams, if you've seen him, but he also is a contender. He's really strong, but I think for the sake of that class, I think Remi definitely has that one down pat.
I think definitely is a very strong term when you've got a 500 dots lifter in Hung in that list. But like we said, we'll see where he ends up. And I mean, even if Hung stays in the 110, I think he's only 102. So maybe that extra body weight or that lack of body weight might come to bite him in the ass in the end.
Yeah, I guess we'll see at the end of the day. But it'll be interesting. It'll shake up what everyone does if Hung goes down to hundreds or goes 110s. But at the end of the day, our team, we've got 4 lifters in 4 different weight classes. We're not planning on chopping and changing. We're just going to go out, do the best we can, have a bit of fun, and ruffle some feathers.
Right. And you kind of mentioned that you're going to go out there and do the best you can, ruffle some feathers. What would you say are your goals? Like, as a group, as a collective, like what would you say is your main objective? And, what would be some like secondary goals below that if you couldn't hit that, then at least we want this. And then I guess what would be a bad day? Like what would be a result that you look back on and say, yeah, we fucked up and that's really disappointing where we kind of ended up? Where do the Chads sit?
So ideal day obviously is take it out. Now I understand that's hard from the challenger bracket. It's a big ask, but I believe that we've put forward a team that is capable to do it. Now we do have to work to do that though. So obviously that would be looking for sort of 3 out of 4 or 4 first place positions. That's probably ideal scenario, right? Now there are a lot of teams and a lot of them are very competitive. So we'll see how that pans out. But in terms of a day that's not favorable, obviously we're sort of getting a couple of seconds, and that will push us down the ranks a bit. But I think with some of our classes like Joyce, Remi, and Brodie, I think they'll be in pretty good stead to at least get a couple of first place positions there. So that's sort of what we're banking on. And then me in the hundreds will do our best and see how we go.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, to win the whole thing from the challengers bracket will be a big ask, like you said. But you guys are a very strong team. And speaking of strong team, next up I wanted to ask about was Brodie. You mentioned Brodie. I know him pretty well. He's such a nice guy. He came into our comp once, or maybe even twice maybe, but I've met him once at our comp at least. And he's a gentle giant from Bendigo. Talk us through, you said you met him at nationals and stuff. How did you guys connect and put him in the team? And how do you see him faring?
So you're right. Brodie is incredibly nice. He's absolutely massive. I don't know if you've seen any of the photos, but us 4 line up as a team. He outshines all of us in size by quite a lot. Yeah, he's a Chad. He's the Chad if you've ever seen one.
Giga
So
Chad.
yeah, he's a giga Chad. I met him at Nationals 2022 after we both competed on the same day. Ever since then, we've pretty much just kept in contact, been talking. And I know that he's incredibly strong. Like he's pushing the bounds of 800 plus in his lifts. So it was really a no-brainer when I thought, okay, right, who's someone that will be incredibly competitive in their weight class? Brodie. So that was pretty much where it came from. And we always kept in contact and he was keen. So that's how it was.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, like he's obviously in a really interesting class because I'm going to touch on that. Well, I'll touch on it now, I suppose. You know, he's in a, I would say, emptier class. Like there's only 3 lifters there, and I would say he's probably the favorite in that group. But like I might expect in some other groups, like I think in the 90s might be some 82s jumping up from the 90s into the 110s. I wonder if there's going to be any 110s who see an opportunity to kind of slide up into the 125 class and cause some damage there. Do you think that's actually a real chance, or do you think those guys in the 110 are pretty honest and going to stick around?
That's a good question.
What to do with JP?
I think in terms of the 110s, I think they're pretty set on where they are. I would love for someone to step up and give Brodie a run for his money because I think he thrives off that big time. And whether someone will, honestly, I don't think they will, but I hope someone does.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting because even though that 125 class, like I mean, there's not many comps where, especially in a local meet, where you have 125 lifters where there's even a full podium. So regardless of the fact, I think Brodie still has a bit of pressure on him because I think a lot of the results are going to come down to dots as well. There's going to be a lot of tiebreakers. And so maybe a good performance from him is actually going to be a key in the result overall. You mentioned being, you mentioned being in the challenge bracket. It's going to be tough. How do you see, or how do you kind of see, being in the challenge bracket as a disadvantage? What are your expectations for how people can perform the next day? And do you think you're just going to be sitting ducks waiting on day 2 to be taken over?
So I've heard a couple of people throw different scenarios out there. From my point of view, at least, and our team, the big advantage for our day, the challenges, is the weigh-in times. So at least for the heavyweights in the afternoon, we weigh in at, I believe, 12 and start lifting at 2, whereas the Premier bracket weigh in at 3 o'clock and start lifting at 5. Now, if you're doing a water cut or anything like that, it's going to be a pretty hard weigh-in to hit, at least feeling your best. So that's the advantage that we would have, I think. But in terms of the hype, I feel like obviously day 2 will probably attract more people naturally because there are more of those bigger name teams. So that's also playing to their advantage. But we can focus on lifting on the day, not chasing someone else's numbers, and leave that for everyone on the second day to sort of follow our numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of almost a small blessing, I suppose. Like sometimes it's nice to just be able to like hit your lifts, not worry so much on what other teams are doing. Well, obviously there are other teams that you're going to focus on the day, but at least the main teams, you don't need to worry about what they're doing. Just do the best you can and just let fate decide the rest of it because it can be, it can be a bit of a mad dash at the finish line, and someone's going to Stephen Bradbury and take over everyone else when they all stumble because they got so distracted by what's going on around them. Whereas actually, you guys have that nice luxury to just hit your biggest total you can, go 8 out of 9 or 9 out of 9, and kind of turn around to everyone else and say good luck. So that's going to be really good. I was going to ask you, how seriously are you guys taking this comp? Even just hearing you talk and obviously the bounce online, it sounds like you're really taking this as a real serious challenge. Do you consider this one of the more serious comps that you've done, or more competitive comps that you've done?
In terms of competitiveness, absolutely. I think what you've done steps up from last year a great amount in terms of, firstly, like the eyes that it's bringing to this. It's talked about a lot more. And the quality of the athletes that are competing, it's just increasing every year and everyone's getting incredibly strong. So I think we're definitely taking it seriously. Like we can't talk the talk and not back it up to the best of our ability. So we definitely are. But it's also, at the same time, got to remember, it's a comp. It's fun. Enjoy it. It's not like it's on the world stage just yet. So at the same time, enjoy it as much as you can.
No, I love that. It's a good approach. Now, we talked before about your goals and where you guys want to land, and you have your eyes set on the big prize at the top there. One of the questions that came in during the Q&A was from Demetrius Metaxas. Metaxas. I'm saying that wrong now. And he's asked, how are the Chads going to cope when they don't even finish top 5?
I think interesting question. Thanks, Mitz. Look, I think from 2nd to 5th, there will be very few points in between. So if someone's missing, maybe if they're getting a couple of seconds or a couple of thirds, that's possible. I'm personally confident in our team. We've got a very strong roster. We're going to put forward. Heaven forbid we come 5th, we eat our words and work harder. But realistically, I don't see top 5 as an option. I would say at the very, very least, top 3 of the whole day.
Very, very bold claims, and I look forward to having you guys eat your words. And obviously, one of the big, I suppose, prizes, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but goals from anybody lifting on the first day on the Challengers bracket is to qualify for the Premier bracket. You are clearly one of the top favourites to finish top 4, and so let's safely assume that's the case. Is your plan to rally the same group next year and to come back into the Premier bracket and try to take out the whole thing from day 2? Or is this going to be a one-stop shop thing and then move on and see how we go?
Yeah, good question. So I think the idea of the Chads is something that can definitely be built upon, because although it's a lot of talk this year, it's something I think could involve a lot of people in a really positive way. It can bring a lot of enjoyment to people who sort of want to push the numbers and talk a little bit and bring a bit of ice to the sport. So I do think the Chads would put up a team next year if we qualify for the Premier bracket 100%. Now, what our individual lifters look like, that'll have to obviously be determined. I think personally I might be jumping over to APA to try and give Worlds a run for its money at some point, but I think there will be a lot of people gunning for that 100 spot.
Excellent. All right, so we're hoping to see the Chads next year in 2025. Now, we've talked loosely about predictions. You guys think that you'll be in the top 3 for sure, and if not, you'd be pretty disappointed. Give me a quick run on that first day. Challengers Day, who's going to be the top 4 to get promoted? It sounds like you think Chads are going to win the first day pretty comfortably.
So I just wrote it down. I think comfortably, whether we do or we don't, I think at least we'll place top 3. So I think for top 3, us, Stronghold look very strong. They've got Tyson. They've got a couple of really strong lifters, and Avia. I think they'll all be sort of quiet killers, and they'll come through with quite strong results. So I think that's sort of top 3 for the first day.
Wow, Avia as a top 3 to get promoted. I really like that as a prediction there. And then overall, you mentioned earlier Sim Strength and Lou Lift, and the Chads. Is that the top 3 there, the podium, or is there another team or two that you also got your eyes on who you have to watch out for?
So I actually think top 3 for the day, if we're going to put ourselves in it in no particular order, would be the Chads, ESS, and Melbourne Strength Culture.
Okay,
I've had a quick look at those teams. I think Melbourne Strength Culture have more of a sleeper build. I think they're going to come with some pretty strong results. That's sort of, that's what I've seen. And ESS, very talented team. And I think they've got what it takes to take a top 3 at least.
No, I really like that as a prediction. And I actually personally think that Melbourne Strength Culture are really, in my opinion, one of the favorites. So that's not, you kind of refer to them as being a sleeper team. And they've got Constance there, who's going to win Best Female Lifter, essentially. They've got a 48 kilo lifter who's going to basically take out a first place. She's very strong, Natasha, but also she's, I think, the only lifter. So she's going to win 6 points there immediately. You've essentially got a guaranteed 12 points. And, that is such a powerful ace in the back pocket. Look, I've got only one last question before I let you go. The Chads, you've got your Instagram page. You're just doing the memes. You're playing the villain role very, very well. Are the Chads actually nice guys?
Give me the money, J. Paul. Send me the check now.
Let's fucking go. Sorry, there was a bit of distortion. I don't know what happened.
Yes.
That was a bit confusing. What happened there? Some scary man appeared on the screen.
Yeah, some specimen. No, I think yes, despite what that was, I think absolutely. If you met us all individually, I would hope you think the same. But as a collective, obviously, the idea is to sort of ruffle some feathers in a nice way and get a bit of eyes on the comp and on the sport in general. Yeah.
Right, and I'm sure you've caught the interview with Chunks, with Daniel Featherston, and he kind of he made reference to you guys and said how much he actually likes that you guys lean into the villain role. I forget what was the term he used. He kind of used a word from WWE, but you guys really lean into that role. And as a meet director, I really appreciate it, dude. Thanks so much for your time. It's been good to chat to you, get a bit of insight. I think the viewers out there are actually going to appreciate hearing you guys. Hearing your thoughts and opinions and whatnot, and actually putting a face to the name, because like myself, I hadn't met you prior to today, so it's nice to go like, okay, cool, that's Tom, he's a good guy, and at least 3/4 of the Chads are friendly and nice. Thanks a lot for your time, mate, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks, JP. Appreciate your time.